Hello, welcome. You're listening to Season 3 of Narcolepsy Navigators, brought to you by Naps for Life CIC. Narcolepsy Navigators is a podcast for raising awareness of these fascinating illnesses through a deep dive into the lives and individuals living with narcolepsy, idiopathic hypersomnia, and Klein-Levin syndrome. I'm Kerry Boga, the founder of Naps for Life CIC, and welcome to our stories. Hi everyone, welcome to Narcolepsy Navigators. I am Kerry, your host.
And I'm Liz, your co-host, and we both have narcolepsy type 1.
And today we're here with Hugh. He's from the UK, and the topic for today is self-employment and hard work. Welcome to his story. Hi Hugh, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks.
And how has your week been?
My week's been okay, actually. It's all the better for having been a bank holiday week and having not to work on the bank holiday. But other than that, it's all good. The sun is out, and that must be a bonus, given the simply appalling weather we've had this year.
That's so true. I began to think that we weren't going to have a spring at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel the weather and grey, overcast skies and lots of rain. It gets me down, and I'm always happier and when the sun's out and not too hot.
So hot that we fall asleep.
Indeed. Yeah. Like early 20s, and that's golden. Occasionally you work abroad, and even in Central Europe, the summers can get 35, 36 degrees centigrade, and you just think, that's rubbish. I'm not happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. And how was your week, Carolee?
It was okay. Yeah, it's gone really quick, actually. It ended quite quickly. I've been doing assessments for hairdressing, so I got another assessment out of the way, which is great. I finished the wig, and I used the wig for the assessment to cut, and it turned out into a nice cut. I had one of the teenagers put on the wig, and they were like, yeah, this is my Nicki Minaj era, or whatever. I don't know. And so they were happy, and they were saying that, yeah, they would buy it.
Nice, well done.
So that was nice, yeah. It's always good to have approval from the youngsters.
The Gen Zs are happy with you.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And how's the wig kicks going?
Not sure if it's working or not, because when I'm not at college, I'm still sleeping and taking all my naps, like 3-4 naps in a day. But when I've been at college, the last 2 weeks, I didn't sleep in the class. But we had practical, so I don't know if that's why I didn't sleep in the class. A true test would have been a theory class, but I didn't sleep in the 2 practical classes, but one of the practical classes was quite short. But then again, now I think about it, I did feel really sleepy. I probably shouldn't have ate lunch, and then I ate lunch, and then I went back to finish the cut, and I chopped 4 inches off I shouldn't have chopped.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so luckily that wasn't a real person.
I mean, I've been taking it for 9 months now, and it's a very different drug to anything that I've taken before. So I've taken most things: modafinil, methylphenidate, dexamphetamines, sodium oxybate, and this feels different, certainly to methylphenidate and dexamphetamine.
Yeah.
I always felt that with dexamphetamine, I used to have a transport workflow, because when I was working in London and living in Hemel, I'd basically pop my tablets just before I'd leap on the train, and then snooze, because the first thing it would make me do is feel really sleepy. And I'd snooze for about half an hour, get on, leap off, and feel Terry Grayskull. I am alive, I am awake. And it's not a subtle drug. I'm definitely buzzing. It has such a short half-life that it actually works before you have to take some more. The whack just doesn't feel like that. It's a lot more subtle. For starters, I get far fewer side effects from it. But sometimes I wonder whether it's working or not. And I guess that from the cataplexy point of view, it works quite nicely. I don't get cataplexy like I used to. I still get a bit of a twinge. It often surprises me. For instance, when I take my son to the cinema, I have no problem staying awake in the cinema. And usually there's no way I can make through a long movie, even on Dexys. I'd have trouble staying awake. I went to a theatre show the other day, and I stayed awake through that. And I'd had lunch, I'd had dinner, I'd had a beer or two, and I'm still awake. So I guess it does work.
that would be a good test for me. I'll go to the theatre. Maybe that's it. Because I was thinking about that this morning. I'm thinking maybe the reason why I can't be sure that I feel the difference is because all the drugs I've been on have been like speed. So I'm used to having that real rush. Like I feel a massive difference when it's kicked in.
Yeah.
I know it's kicked in. And when it's not there, I know it's not there. Like the difference. It's so dramatic. And so I was thinking, maybe because I've been on those drugs since I was 18, and when they took me off, it was only 2 years ago, and now I've been put on wake. Maybe that's why my body's, what is this? I can't feel that like immediate buzz. Oh, this is working. It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. I think every single film I've been to see, I've managed to stay awake, and even some reasonably long films. And that's made me quite pleased because I've then been able to go to sleep. I get very disrupted sleep, but I often found that dexamphetamine would make that a bit worse. So I don't have that anymore. And sometimes I like to take naps. I could do that on WAC-X if I want to. And I don't find that on dexamphetamine, there's no way I could take a nap on that. Once I've taken a dose, then other than the original snooze, I'm up, I'm raring to go. But it feels a bit unnatural. I've just got used to it over taking it for many years.
I'm only 8 weeks in. Yes.
Yeah, and it certainly takes time to ramp up to full working sort of thing, really. And I think it's successful for me, or at least partly successful, I think, and certainly the most pleasant drug of anything that I've taken so far to treat narcolepsy. That's whether it's cataplexy or excessive daytime sleepiness syndrome.
Yeah. I feel like if I stopped taking this, I wouldn't feel like I needed to kill someone to get hold of it. That's how I felt on methylphenidate and the others.
Yeah. I'd get intense withdrawal, and I can only describe it as, and I gave up smoking. It's that kind of feeling, that withdrawal you get from giving up smoking. If I was working during the week and free at the weekend, then I would try and have a drug holiday at the weekend, and I'd be absolutely useless for probably 2 days. And the withdrawal would be just so intense. I'd be so moody and grumpy. I didn't really like the feeling of dexamphetamine or taking it. I respected what it did, and it certainly allowed me to work in situations that I simply wouldn't have been able to work in if I'd not been taking it. Yeah, the withdrawal was one of the really unpleasant things about it. And when your kid's telling you that, Dad, you're really grumpy, when you're on a drug holiday, you've got to listen to that and go, that's not so cool. I'm happy not to be taking it.
Yeah. It's crazy the different side effects for the different medications. Because I used to take modafinil, and in a way I miss the buzz of modafinil because it really would get me through the day. But there were so many side effects. I was quite wired. Like I'd get a lot of headaches and stomach aches, and I was always hungry. And then I'd have a massive crash at the end of the day. So WAC-X is a lot more settled for me as well. But same as you, Hugh, sometimes I can't really work out if it's actually working or not because it is so subtle, but I'm awake, but I'm not feeling like all those side effects. So is it really working? But I guess it must be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I took modafinil when it first came out, and I think I probably must have been one of the first patients to be prescribed. I took it for a couple of years, but it was pretty disappointing from the point of view of keeping me up. I found that it just made me really pretty angry and nasty whilst I was on it, and a bit shouty. That's not the guy I am really in real life. I get really ratty on it. I used to take it out with my flatmates, which wasn't fair on them. After one outburst, I was spectacularly grumpy. I just thought, that's it. I can't take this anymore. This is not good. I went to see the specialist and said, can I have something else, please?
Yeah, it can really affect mood. Definitely. What I found with WAC-X the other day, though, is I actually couldn't nap. And I was meant to join Carolee for a podcast in the evening. But I couldn't nap all day, even when I was meant to have my planned nap at work, and then after work, and then after dinner. And I kept trying to nap because I felt so groggy, but I just couldn't do it. And it's so odd. I wonder if that's from the WAC-X as well, or if that's just my brain some days is like, nope, you're not napping today, even though you need it.
No, I think at the moment, I did wonder about having a nap before the podcast, and my brain was saying, no, you're good for this. And even having had a reasonably substantial dinner, my brain's still going, no, you're good. You don't need the nap. You're not sleepy.
I'm glad it's not just me that happens to, because it feels so like it shouldn't happen because we all have narcolepsy. Like, surely we can just nap whenever we want. But then sometimes your brain just tricks you and it's nope, it's not happening today.
So Liz, how was your week?
My week was good. Yeah. Also very happy that it was Bank Holiday Monday. So I only had to work 3 days this week, which is nice. But yeah, I had that weird thing on Tuesday where I couldn't nap and felt very groggy all day. But the rest of the week has been good. I have sometimes been struggling to nap at lunchtimes, which means my brain works a bit slower in the afternoons at work, which is a bit frustrating. But I've managed to get through, and I'm also enjoying the lighter evenings because I feel like that just fills me with so much joy and energy. And I just love feeling that warmth on my skin. It makes me feel much more human. So yeah, it's been quite a good week, I'd say.
So Hugh, tell us who you are, where you're residing, your age, if you feel comfortable, and what do you do for a living?
I'm Hugh. I'm 53. I live in Plymouth. I describe myself as a video technologist by profession. And what I mean by that is most of my life I've worked in live entertainment of some description. That's theatre, rock and roll, pop, corporate events. And I've just drifted into the area of video through lighting and sound. And I basically do the video side of rock concerts, pop acts and things like that. Whether that's system design, operating video, doing multi-camera directing, a load of different things that I do. My day job at the moment is that I'm a product manager for a company that makes video processing for the sorts of screens that you see at rock concerts, the artists or to the side of the artists, and increasingly used in what's called virtual production. Shows like the Mandalorian, for example, use great big LED screens behind the actors that they can put a virtual environment, a virtual set, if you like, behind the actors. They can do all sorts of clever things with that. They can change locations at a mouse click and change where the sun is at a mouse click. A company that I work for designs the processing that makes all that sort of stuff happen. That's what I'm doing. How I got there is narcolepsy at its core, really, because without narcolepsy, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So from that point of view, that is the silver lining. It has forced me to make some life choices that have got me here. And as you both know, it's hard. It's hard working with narcolepsy for all sorts of reasons. And I was very lucky I didn't have narcolepsy as a teenager. I started to get the symptoms of narcolepsy when I was at university. And that was the fractured sleep. I started drinking lots of coffee and smoking lots of cigarettes to keep me awake. And then by the age of sort of 22, 23, I started to get hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis. And that was really bad. I had really bad sleep paralysis, really bad hypnagogic hallucinations. And I talked to a psychiatrist about that. He had no idea what I was on about.
What did you think it was when you talked to him?
He had no answers for me, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
And so I actually dropped out of university. So I only did a couple of years at university. And I went to drama school. I went to the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama and trained as a theatre stage manager. I was much more drawn to doing lighting and sound and much better at that. Those days, the only way that most people of my kind of stripes got a taste of technical theatre or a formal training in technical theatre was to do a course in stage management, and that's what I did. And so I left drama school in 1992, and I got diagnosed with narcolepsy in 1998. And somewhere along the lines, my symptoms just got worse and worse. And my hypnagogic hallucinations were terrible. I used to have like multiple episodes a night. They really freaked me out. They were really bad. And one day I just thought, I've really had enough of this.
Can I ask you, do you remember any of them?
Yeah, I remember them very clearly.
Could you share with the listeners, for those who don't know what they are?
Yeah, the hypnagogic hallucinations are the sort of ones that I've experienced. They're different themes, but the hallucinations are, complete sensory kind of hallucinations. So the visual, you can hear, you can feel, you can smell these hallucinations. So they're very vivid and very real and very frightening. And the sort of things that I'd have are that there's a presence in your room and is lurking in the corner, and you can feel the malevolence radiating from this thing, like a ghost, I guess, a spectre or something in the corner of the room. So you'd have those kind of apparitions. A common one was you'd have this sort of thing on your chest. There's a famous picture by Henry Fuseli called The Nightmare, which you may be familiar with. And that has a maiden with this kind of gnome type creature sat on a woman's chest. And it's that kind of feeling. And you get that, and you get those weirder and more freaky ones, the out-of-body experiences, and much more ghostly, apparition-y, kind of nasty experiences. And yeah, just horrible and very frightening. For me, I'd wake up and my body would still be paralyzed, and it would take me a while. I'd have to hold my head up so my head would be straight, and as my body slowly unparalyzed, I'd be able to like sit up. It was pretty awful, and I'd see things coming through the window and things like that. I have to say, if you're dating and stuff like that, it's not a big one for the bedroom, as it were, especially when you've been seeing someone for not a very long time and you've got things climbing through their window and you're totally freaked out and they're totally freaked out because you're totally freaked out. It's that kind of WTF, what the hell's going on there? Who have I ended up with? Who is this madman? And so you haven't seen what I've seen. Awful. Because I worked in theatre, I was used to doing long days and working late nights. I drank a lot of coffee, which I could get free from the theatre bar. I had a constant stream of coffee and I smoked a hell of a lot. That kept me awake. I thought genuinely that it wasn't anything weird. It was just feeling a bit depressed. I hadn't slept very well, which I probably hadn't. And I was just working long hours. It was the hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis that really drove me to get a diagnosis. And I was very lucky to be living in Oxford. And Oxford's a really good place if you've got something like narcolepsy or some such thing. It's a really good place to be ill. And when I was living there, a couple of the real top experts in narcolepsy were working at the hospitals in Oxford and were associated with the university. So it just happened that the locum GP who saw me, and I said, I don't know what this is. I'm not depressed. I'm not mad. I just have these things at night. She said, I've no idea what you've got, but I know someone who might. Someone who I went to the university with here in Oxford, who's very bright, and he's a psychiatrist. And I'm going to send him to see you. You can go and see him. So I saw him and I spoke to him about it. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what you have, but my professor wanted to come to help here.
I like that.
Yeah. So I went to see a chap called Professor Gregory Stores, who specialized in children's narcolepsy. And I sat down and explained what was going on for me. He actually had his registrar sat with him. And he said, I know exactly what you've got. And you have this hypnagogic hallucinations. And he gave me the whole spiel about hypnagogic hallucinations, what they were, their cultural significance and everything else like that. And I said, what do you do about it? And he said, you can take some antidepressants. I thought, oh, really? I've had suffered depression when I was at university and through my young adult life. And so I'd taken antidepressants before and they suck. I really didn't want to take any more. So I thought I'd rather just suffer the sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, take that on the chin and accept that this is something that happened to me. But at the time, I was beginning to start to get a bit more problems with the EDS and feeling tired at work and falling asleep at work. So I managed to get sent for sleep studies. That's when I got diagnosed with narcolepsy when I was about 28. And I was actually on tour as a sound operator for a big musical. And obviously being diagnosed with narcolepsy when you're on tour doesn't go down well with the company that I worked for. They're a bit mean to me when I was first diagnosed, and I thought, this sucks. Maybe I should just have a pause and think about what I'm going to do with my life, given that now I know what's been going on in my life and why I've been really tired, why I've been falling asleep, why I've had these sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations. And I was starting to get cataplexy as well. Cataplexy is really weird. And why this is all happening to me. So I decided, the doctor signed me off a bit. So I thought I'd go and investigate narcolepsy and how it worked for me and have a bit of time out, think about what I was going to do next. And I was very fortunate that when I was living in Oxford, I worked for a university theatre there as a theatre technician. The theatre that I worked in used to have Oxford University students in for quite a lot of time, about 20 weeks. I got pretty friendly with a lot of the students there. One of my students used to work for me in the holidays sometimes. He was really good at lighting, and we'd stay friends when he graduated. He ended up working for a company that's made the top-notch lighting consoles in the world, the lighting consoles that did the Rolling Stones and things like that. But they're little kind of startup. They employed like 12 people, but they made these amazing lighting consoles, and they had a huge-shaped hole in their organization. He put me up for a job there doing technical support and training, and said, I think you'd be a great fit here. I got the job, and it turned out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to me. They knew I went into that. They said, I have narcolepsy. And they said, yeah, so what? And that was that. He has this. We've all got stuff wrong with us. Don't worry about it. And it was brilliant to have that acceptance from people, because in my little sort of 6 months or something that I had out, I started applying for jobs. I'd always fess up and say, I have narcolepsy, almost to see what these people would say. I can remember one job that I went for. The owners of the company that I was applying to work for had a sense of humor failure. It was really unpleasant to me, to the point I pretty much said, I think I'm going to leave now. And didn't even get a thank you for coming. I didn't even get my expenses paid or anything. This is not going to work out, is it? They were incredibly rude. But that company got bought by a much bigger American company, and they were pretty chill with me having narcolepsy. It was just the way I roll. And I can remember having a full body cataplexy attack when I was out in Spain doing some training out in San Sebastian. One of the owners of the company phoned my managing director up and said, he's just collapsed. Do we send him to the hospital? And he just said, he does that. Give him a couple of minutes. He'll be fine. And he did that a few times. You sometimes get one of our customers of saying, it's the end of the day, he's fallen asleep on the trade show stand. He does that. Give him a couple of minutes, it'll be fine. They were really chill about it. All the more amazing that the American lighting company that bought us were Texans. Texas is a right-to-work state where you can be fired for a reason, and immediately. They weren't known for being particularly nice to employees, but they were pretty decent to me. The narcolepsy was never a problem.
How come you disclosed your condition in the interviews? Just because I'm curious. I would usually wait until after I've been offered the job, but it's nice to hear different perspectives on that.
Sometimes I'll wait after an interview and then I'll mention that I had narcolepsy, but always before I get hired, because I want to know how they react. I was approached by a Belgian company to go and work for them. They flew me and my partner out to Belgium a few times. The last stop was to have the company medical. I disclosed to their doctor that I had narcolepsy, and letters and things from a specialist back home, who's a professor of medicine. She ignored what my specialist said and basically dinged me on the fact that I had narcolepsy. I couldn't work at heights or do any of this. I was pretty put out. I said, look, if the doctor says if I feel safe to work, then I'm safe to work. That's generally the way it works with me. If I'm happy to do something, then I'm happy to do something. I was really miffed to lose a job because the doctor, who was a general practitioner, didn't know enough about my particular illness and wasn't actually even prepared to look at the extensive letter my specialist at the time wrote. I've talked to Hugh about this. I'm aware of this work, and I think he's good for this. So I'm glad if that's the company culture, then I want to know about that. Although it can hurt, turn down for something, perhaps that's for the best. If this is the company culture, then I'll know about that. I almost want to see the reaction.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because it's nice to know their true colors up front. So you don't job and then you're like, actually, they're not going to support me.
Exactly. And I ended up in another company for 3 or 4 years who provided the video equipment and crews for big rock and roll tours and theatre shows in the West End and things. And again, the owners of the company just didn't care that I had narcolepsy. Just not a problem. My office was attached to the warehouse, and it was not uncommon for me. In those days, I wasn't taking anything because I hadn't discovered dexamphetamine yet. And I'd often be having a nap at my desk, and near out in the warehouse, he's asleep. And one of the older guys would just go, no, leave him alone. He's cool, leave him alone. Don't you dare. Yeah, that was never a problem. Occasionally people would go, Hugh, sleepy Hugh or something. And you just give them a hard look and go, very funny. Or some of the other colleagues just go, just don't. leave it alone.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm just so curious. How did you feel when you were diagnosed with narcolepsy? Because obviously it was quite a long period that you're experiencing symptoms, and then maybe wasn't the first thing that you thought when you were experiencing the hallucinations that it was actually narcolepsy.
Now, I'd heard of narcolepsy, and I'd seen what narcolepsy was because I went to a boarding school, and my school had a really good music department, and we could usually attract really good professional musicians to play at the school. And there used to be a chap who used to come and attend all these events who lived locally with his friend, and he had narcolepsy. And bless him, slept through every show, every concert. And what's his deal? And someone, oh, okay. So when it was suggested, I had an idea that I probably had it before I was diagnosed, as a lot of us do. It was a relief because it did confirm to me that probably I didn't spend vast amounts of time looking things up on the internet, but I guess my instincts told me that I probably had it. Also, it opens a lot of questions, and you start to question your whole life, and you have a light bulb. But that's why I was feeling, this is why this happened to me. And suddenly bits of the jigsaw in your life start to make sense as you put the pieces together and go, oh, okay, I get why I was doing this and why I felt like that. And then part of you goes, oh, fuck, how am I going to cope with this? How am I going to deal with this? Now I know this, how am I going to move forward? And that's why I think it's probably quite wise that I took a few months out after I'd been diagnosed. And although I had to work, I thought, no, I'm just going back to what I did before. And it really has me for six a little bit. And I probably need to sit down and think about how this actually going to work for me going forwards.
I was going to say, would you recommend that to other people, that after they're diagnosed, they should take some time to sit with it?
Yeah, if you have to. I'm not advocating people just go on the dole or something, but yeah, I think sometimes you're taking some time out possibly is a good thing to do, and perhaps getting some support, some therapy or something like that, help you through those first few months. Because if you're like me, you go, okay, I get it, I've got narcolepsy, but in some respects that opens more questions than it solves. And it certainly knocked my confidence for a bit. And certainly my brain's good, I'm a reasonably smart guy, but I need to see how I can make my symptoms work in the world of work and in my personal life going forwards. How does that work? And it took me a while to do the research, get the confidence back, and actually have to find someone who was prepared to employ me, for whom me having naps at work just wasn't a problem.
And what kind of reflections or conclusions did you come to during that period of time where you gave yourself time to think these things through?
I did a lot of research. I had a computer at home. I was on the internet. We're talking 98. So the internet was pretty rudimentary. But the most important thing for me was that I found Narcolepsy UK, or UKN, AN as it was called then. And in the magazine, they would publish like a list of people who were up for being regional reps. And there was a woman who was about my age, maybe a little bit younger than me, who lived in Oxford. And so I got to meet the first person with narcolepsy. And that was really important for me, to meet someone else who just understood and knew. And so I met up with her, and we just had a really good chat and lots of emails about how it worked for her, because she'd had it for a bit longer than I had. And she got used to university and whatever, and got a good job, and she managed that. She had medication for it, and that was a big thing for me. I used to be a director and trustee of Narcolepsy UK for many years, and I'd certainly recommend going to some of the events that they set up, whether it's a conference or the local meetups, because meeting other people with narcolepsy is a wonderful thing. And it makes you feel that you're not on your own and you're not struggling on your own. Because a lot of the time, your specialist, their time is precious, and they don't get to spend an awful lot of time with you, depending on the relationship that you have with your specialist and what hospital you go to and all that kind of stuff, what kind of doctor they are, whether you have access to them. They don't have narcolepsy, so they don't know necessarily. They only have what their patients tell them. And that's a very different experience to actually talking to someone who's been there and done that and live with it and work with it or not work with it. Everyone's journey is valid and something to learn from. Meeting someone the first time with narcolepsy was just amazing. When I was at the lighting company that I worked for, our American parent company had sent over a sales guy to work for us in the UK from the US, and his mother had narcolepsy. He'd just chuckle and just go, "You just remind me of my mom." One of my cataplexy triggers is smut or rude jokes or whatever. And I'm a filthy public schoolboy. I have a schoolboy sense of humor, really, but schoolboy gags and things make me, I just have to think about them when I start getting cataplexy. And he'd just look at me and see my face twitching, go, "Look at you knocking out. Look at you. You remind me just of my mom." It was really nice to hear him and his fondness for his mum and the fact that he'd grown up with, I think, 11 other siblings who had narcolepsy, and that's how they looked after her. And she was a nurse. She had a full-time job, but when he described them as when they were watching the funnies on the TV, the cartoons or whatever, and she'd start laughing, they'd have to rescue her cigarettes before she'd have like a cataplexy attack, stay on the sofa with a cigarette.
Gosh, that's funny. And you see, your topic is self-employment.
Self-employment, yes. So I've had various bits of self-employment, and I started off when I left drama school being self-employed. Strictly, although I have a full-time job, I still do self-employed activity, sort of side hustle. Until the pandemic, I had almost 10, 12 years of unbroken self-employment. And only the pandemic forced me to take a full-time job for a bit, and it's working out. But the company I work for let me off of a good behavior and let me do my side hustle from time to time. As I said, I used to do video technology type stuff for corporate events, for rock bands and pop stars, and do some multi-camera directing. So I did that for about 12 years.
How do you manage the work-life balance and managing narcolepsy at the same time?
Tricky one. One of the nice things about being self-employed, especially if you have a certain amount of notoriety for what you do, is that you can pick and choose what you do. So you can say no to things that you don't want to do. Some of my colleagues would tour the world and do stadium rock bands and stuff like that, which just didn't interest me. I get very bored, really, and it's for me. So I always used to enjoy doing things where I program things, set them, and just leave. Or go out for a short amount of time, do a festival tour, happy with the festival tour, do short arena tours, but never really do any more than that. When you're taking amphetamine, no one gives you a prescription for longer than a month anyway. At least they never gave me a Dexy for longer than a month. So I couldn't go out on tour without coming home and getting another ounce of Dexy amphetamine. And then there's certain places that I can't work. So I can't work in the Middle East because narcotics are just a no-no. Even in countries like Dubai or the United Arab Emirates, there's a lot of work for Western techies like myself. Risk taking narcotics into the UAE just too great. They're basically illegal unless you have a doctor who specializes in narcolepsy in the UAE who's prepared to prescribe them to you locally. And that's very unlikely. You're not going to be able to get them there. So there's loads of work in the Middle East for people like me. In Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, just too tricky with the drugs. And some places like China, again, I've worked in China, but I didn't take the drugs with me. And it's lucky that sometimes some of the things I do mean that I can get away without having to take drugs all the time. Because I work in the evenings, I'm good in the evenings. So sometimes I'm not having to take drugs to parts of the world where they don't smell favorably on narcotics. But essentially, amphetamines are narcotic, and it's tricky to get it through. I've got amphetamines into the United States, I've got them into Russia and Ukraine, and many other countries. There are some places where it's really too difficult, and I've had to rely on naps to get through.
And you're obviously a very ambitious person and have achieved a lot in your career. What tips would you give to other people with narcolepsy who also want to achieve things within their profession?
When going to self-employment, do you think that is a better...
I think sometimes self-employment can work depending on what you're doing. I think I've met a lot of people with narcolepsy who are self-employed because it just suits their lifestyle. it suits the way they work. And sometimes just because they've ended up on the wrong end of the employers and they've just thought, stuff this. I want to work for myself. I want to do my own thing. And it can sometimes be a better fit for people. Again, it really depends on what field that you work in and what you're trying to do. But there are lots of things you can do with narcolepsy if you can have naps. If you're the sort of person who needs to have a nap a few times during the day and you've experienced workplaces where they're not prepared to make a reasonable adjustment, or at least a reasonable adjustment to your particular needs, maybe thinking about that route is a way forward. So I would recommend considering it, especially if you're bemused with your current situation and want to do something worthwhile with your life. You just have to find the right path.
Yeah. And do you have any other strategies apart from medication to help you manage your symptoms day to day?
Naps, definitely naps. Even if I'm taking Wakix, and even I've got used to taking naps. They're part of my life. I like sleeping. The little bit that I do, as long as I don't have hypnagogic hallucinations or something, I found that sometimes in the days when I took dexamphetamine, as I've mentioned, it's not a pleasant drug, and I don't always like taking it. And if I don't have it, I won't take it. I found that having naps sometimes allowed me to get through the day for what I was trying to do. In the evening, when I tend to be more alive and more awake anyway, I could get through and do a show in the evening to the bands that I was working for without necessarily having to use medication. And I would just mention that for a year or so, I didn't take any medication relatively recently because I got diagnosed with high blood pressure.
Yeah.
If you have high blood pressure, Dexies are a no-no.
Yeah, they take you off them. That's happened to me. I almost had the stroke, and so they took me off it cold turkey, which was really rough.
I went into hospital to go for basically a drugs review to see if I could take Wakix. And because I go to the Royal Brompton, the first thing they do when you walk through the door, you sit in the clinic, and someone walls up, they take your blood pressure. They take your bloods before you do anything. So they check your kidneys and liver function, and they put you in an ECG because they're a heart and lungs hospital. And my specialist is sleep apnea expert. And my previous was a sleep apnea. And they just have a few people that treat narcolepsy. But that tends to mean that when I went in to have a Wakix review, the first thing they do is they sit you down, check you out, they do observations. And my blood pressure was really high. And the nurse went, I'm going to leave you for 45 minutes. Have a cup of tea. I'll come back and do it again. And then she did me one arm, looked at my blood pressure, then did me on the other arm, and then went to fetch one of the specialist registrars who was on duty, a very earnest young doctor, to come and have a look. And so he did my blood pressure again and was very unhappy and put me down onto the ward, checked me over, listened to my lungs and chest, did everything, looked at all the results, and then called my consultants. And they said, are you out of breath? Do you have trouble going upstairs? Do you have trouble walking down? I goes, no, I don't have any problems with that. Your blood pressure is really high. And we need to do something about it. And we need to find out why it's high. And I said, so what about the dexam? I said, you're going to have to come off that. You can't take that anymore. I'm really sorry. And yeah, so it took me a while. I had to work without any help for a bit, and including the sort of rock and roll work that I do. And yeah, that was tough. But naps helped me get through. I think when I was working for a video company, sometimes I don't want to have a nap where people can see me because I feel a bit vulnerable. People seeing that I'm napping. We used to have some executive toilets, which were very nice for clients. I used to go and bunk off to the executive toilets and have a nap. And sometimes I'd fall off. So someone in the store next door, so I fell off the loo. Okay. So I've done that. That's helped me out numerous times. You just find a comfy loo. It's designed just the right way. If I put my head back like that, I'm not going to fall this way. And 10 minutes. Yes, I'm not even. And sometimes it doesn't always, you get caught out and you fall off.
I'm always on the lookout for I can nap. Whenever I go out, I'm like, that would be a good spot. That one's not great. That one's too visible. That looks very comfy.
Yeah. At work, although I work from home now in Plymouth, my office is in London, and I have a comfy chair, a very expensive comfy chair, especially bought for my particular requirements of napping. So I can just lean back I close my eyes and hope that I don't snort badly.
Have you achieved more or less than you thought you would after you received your diagnosis of narcolepsy?
That's a very good question. I think having narcolepsy made me use directions in my career that perhaps wouldn't have been evident if I'd not had. And certainly before I was diagnosed, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I did lighting. I was good at lighting. I was good at sound. I didn't know which one of those I preferred doing more than the other. To be honest, I don't know how far I would have got in either of those professions. But what's being diagnosed with narcolepsy did is that gave me the opportunity to have some time out to think about what I was going to do next. And as I said, I ended up working for this lighting company. And the great thing about that lighting company was that I ended up training and supporting and helping some of the biggest lighting designers and production designers, people who design big rock and roll shows in the world. That was a godsend to me from a career perspective, because these people knew who I was, what I did, what I could do for them. And then that gave me a career, basically. And for people who knew me and liked me, having narcolepsy just wasn't a problem. And even if they thought maybe Hugh's not the touring kind of guy, I'd still get invited to go and set up shows and make them work before they went out on tour. So from that perspective, if I hadn't had narcolepsy, I wouldn't have got the job in this lighting company. And everything else that I've done subsequent to that has been based
On the first.
having worked at that company. The first job I got after I was diagnosed.
Wow. It's like the sliding doors, right?
Exactly. And, what could have happened? I don't think too hard about it, really. There are times when I've been doing video. So I work for a German rock band, and they're very big in the German-speaking world. And they can sell out stadiums. And there's something to be said for doing what I'm doing, operating the video, or makes all the video behind them work. And I'm doing that in front of 60,000 Germans who are losing their shit. And I'm thinking to myself, I love my job. And I'm thinking, without narcolepsy, I wouldn't be doing that. I wouldn't have this experience. And in that sliding doors moment, who knows what would have happened to me if I hadn't had it? Maybe I would have been successful, maybe not. I don't know. But certainly a part of me wants to succeed and doesn't want narcolepsy to get in the way. And I know for some people, that narcolepsy thing will always be an issue with me. They've seen me and they know me professionally. And the fact that I have narcolepsy means that they'll never employ me. I'll never work. But that's really their problem and not mine. And the people who know me, who employ me, who I work for, they've got to be chill with the fact that that's just the way I roll. And the German bands I work for, all the crew on the bands, all the people who I share a tour bus with, they all know I have narcolepsy. And there will always be someone on the crew who, after the show, having had a shower, got on the tour bus there with a glass of wine and munching on a post-show sandwich. But suddenly the dexamphetamine would have run out. And when you hit that sort of fifth point with dexamphetamine, it just runs out and fall asleep. I would have hit this point and just with a glass of wine still in my hand, and someone would have just gently taken the wine glass out of my hand to stop it dribbling on the floor. A monitor engineer that I work with once said, "You're the only person who will never get glasses and a moustache in a Sharpie put on your face when you fall asleep in the crew room, because everyone else other than you gets a Sharpie moustache and some glasses on."
That's nice that they respect you enough to do that.
And do you think expectations on you as a man are different from a woman when it comes to managing your narcolepsy, being able to show vulnerabilities around having a health condition?
I think women have it probably a lot harder than men. Well, almost certainly they do have it harder than men, I think, because a lot of women are going to want to have children. And at the point at which you want to have children and have kids, that probably brings a whole level of stuff that goes along with it. And I can't imagine being asked to stop taking your medication and having to look after kids when you have narcolepsy. It must be really tough. I have a son and he's great. And he's grown up with me having narcolepsy. But I think it's a different challenge when you're having to breastfeed and take kids out to the toddler groups and whatever. That must be really hard. And I think having things like periods and things like that when you have narcolepsy. Don't know what that, I can't experience that.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because this year at the Wake Up Narcolepsy conference, Dr. Emmanuel, talked about this. He was saying that he wasn't happy. He mentioned this to researchers and stuff, and they didn't seem to think that was even worth researching. And he was like, but there must be a difference between how a woman is when she's not having her period and when she is. These are the things that he's trying to push forward for them to research, because it must make a difference. There isn't enough research being done about these differences and why, when the body has these hormonal changes, what effect it has when you already have narcolepsy in the system.
Exactly. And going on from that, how narcolepsy would affect women going through perimenopause or the menopause. But there's very little research done on that. I think that goes for a whole host of medical issues that, often the experiences of women, or indeed the racial and cultural differences, are not really investigated or looked into. As, for example, routes to diagnosis and things like that. How is narcolepsy perceived in different cultures, and whether that's a problem with getting a diagnosis. I don't think a lot of these things aren't really researched as much as they could be, given that there are other illnesses that have the same frequency as narcolepsy that are a lot better known and have a lot more research and funding behind trying to find the cures for. I just think sometimes we're considered just sleepy. And that's the thing. I think that there are more profound implications for studying how the sleep-wake mechanisms of the brain really actually work. I think studying people with narcolepsy is the gateway to doing that.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
I think that can help everyone if research into sleep is invaluable, because everyone needs sleep. If we benefit from that because they put more money into research for us as well, then everyone's happy.
I once heard one of the great sort of narcolepsy specialists, when I was diagnosed, he had done research that suggested the average medical student received 30 minutes worth of training to sleep medicine, which is, given that the average human spends 8 hours asleep, is just amazing. And that even neurologists and their specialist training have a fairly limited amount of training in sleep, which goes to show that if GPs and neurologists don't have much training in it, then there's no wonder that it takes a lot of people a long time to be diagnosed. And actually, well, I'm lucky in that whilst I'd had narcolepsy for a while before I was diagnosed, when I actually really pushed to get a diagnosis, I actually got one pretty quickly. Whereas it can take people haggling with their GP to get them referred. And even when they do get referred, they don't always get referred to the right place.
Yeah, so true.
Yes. I was going to say, for all the doctors listening out there, if you want to pressure you to do more research, because we're already in 2024. We have to get to a point in life where people value sleep as much as they value food and exercise. You've got to think of it on that level. Just like how you would say to someone, you must drink your water every day. You have to think of sleep as that important as food, as exercise and water. Sleep has to come up a level and has to be seen as the same. And I think once they start valuing it at that level, they will want to teach it more. They will want to give more to it, because it is as valuable as that.
Essential part of life itself. And people need to sleep. They need enough sleep. I think there are so many ailments that people commonly suffer from that can have their roots at not getting a decent amount of sleep. And I think it's really pretty poor that medical students don't get an awful lot of sleep medicine training, because really, when you think about it, an experienced general practitioner, when delivered with someone who presents these symptoms, excessive sleepiness, cataplexy, sleep paralysis, and hypnagogic hallucinations, it's like a smoking gun. I suppose people have different severities of symptoms. For your classic narcolepsy, those telltale signs, even if it was just excessive tiredness, if you weren't presenting with any kind of depression or whatever, you want to go get them checked out for sleep apnea. And then if they've got the added complexity of the cataplexy, nothing else has cataplexy.
Yeah.
It's a slam dunk.
It's so funny you say that, because it's a slam dunk to the point where it's almost shocking that it's underdiagnosed.
Yeah. I think there are many people who haven't been diagnosed who've been thinking, what the hell is going on with my life? And I guess it must be quite frightening and not really knowing or not really understanding what these symptoms are and where they come from. Because cataplexy is just a weird one. There are other illnesses where you get the excessive daytime sleepiness. But cataplexy, that's just weird. And people get sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations without having to have narcolepsy. But cataplexy, that's just weird. And there is nothing like it.
I think now might be a good time for my red button question, but I have a feeling that I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
By the way.
Okay, so if you could press a red button and completely get rid of narcolepsy from your life and never have experienced it, would you do it and why?
Yes, I probably would.
That surprised me.
I know it's got me to where I am and I've made the choices that I've made and I have been reasonably successful in my career, even notwithstanding the fact that I have narcolepsy. But it's not a barrel of laughs. It's not fun. It hasn't made my life always very easy. And that whilst I can live with this, I can put up with it. It's not a fun condition. And Pat, I'd probably not have it.
I think we can all share that sentiment, at least on some days anyway.
So there's the broken sleep. I've lived with it for so long now, just not having a full night's sleep. Decades. I think it must be so blissful to be able to sleep. I remember when I was a kid, being able to go to bed at 11 o'clock and wake up at 7 and having slept the night through. I've not done that for so long. The last time I actually got anything like that, I was on a trial for sodium oxybate because you have to take one dose, wake yourself up. It was almost impossible. And take another dose, and then it knocks you out for a few hours. That's the nearest I've got to having a decent night's sleep. From that point of view, I could cope with all the other symptoms. It's just not sleeping that really gets to me.
Thank you, Hugh, for coming on and sharing your story. It was really good to have you on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And
likewise.
To end it, I always like to say happy napping, everyone.
Happy napping, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hugh. Bye.
Narcolepsy Navigators is produced by a team of volunteers working for the Naps for Life CIC, which is a non-profit group dedicated to improving the lives of people with sleep disorders through community action. You can help grow our podcast and join our sleep disorder support group by visiting the website www.napsforlife.com. If you or someone you know has a sleep disorder and would like to share your story on Narcolepsy Navigators, please email us at narcolepsynavigators@gmail.com. You can also support us by donating at the website. Happy napping, everyone.